Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Another fun day on the impeachment circuit. Lots of fun, lots of excitement, lots of, wow, where'd Trump find these lawyers? Where exactly do you get these guys? When you thought Rudy and Sidney and the rest of them were bad, wow. When your defense is, well, Maxine Waters, when your defense is, well, Madonna, when that's your defense, when your defense is that Donald Trump is no better or no worse than Maxine Waters, I think you're going to lose your base maybe because, wow, the right-wing heads. Understand, the right wing hates Maxine Waters for a ton of reasons. So to throw her out there as well, she did it. Our guy should be able. Not really the best argument you want to make. Just kind of throwing that out there. Now they made the argument that this is just normal. This is normal political rhetoric. Just is what it is. People use the word fight all the time. Little difference, and I got to throw this out here because I say the same thing. You got to fight back. You got to stand up for yourself. You got to take it to them. I don't mean it by stabbing them in the heart with a flag. I don't mean it by taking a fire extinguisher and bashing their head in. I don't mean it by gouging their eyes out with the point of a flag. That's not how it's meant. So understand, there's a difference here. There's a different standard. And one that I think they're trying to muddle. Look, since Donald Trump came onto the scene, it's always been take that guy outside and kick the you-know-what out of him, throw him out without a coat. It's always been wanting this kind of violence. And I guess the argument that you could make in this vein is that maybe people on the left kind of understand that they're not. When they say fight back, they're not really meaning, ball up your digits and go punch, that person literally. And I say this too, maybe Democrats will learn to get into the fight and mix it up a little bit, ball up their digits and throw. I've said this a bunch of times. I mean it figuratively. I don't think Democrats are ever going to be that. But it's a figurative thing. It means, grow a spine, stand up for yourself. Say some mean words back, like no. It's just crazy. But for me, it came down to a couple of real interesting moments today. Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, the quote unquote two moderate women. Obviously, Collins from Maine, Murkowski from Alaska. They asked what I think the question everybody should have been asking from the beginning. And look, I'm a dumb truck driver. It was the first question that I said. It's the first thing I want to know. And their question is, exactly when did President Trump learn of the breach of the Capitol? What specific actions did he take to bring the rioting to an end? And when did he take them? Please be as detailed as possible. That was the question. The attorney, Michael T. Van Der Veen. Mr. Van Der Veen went on this, weird kind of filibustery answer, blaming Democrats all along the way, because evidently he believes that they should have, they should have known, they should have, brought this out. He came really nowhere close to the answer. And look, he's a good lawyer. And the reason I say he's a good lawyer is because I guarantee you he never asked Donald Trump that question because he didn't want to know. It's one of those plausible deniability things. Like, I'm not going to ask you, what I probably already know the answer to because I don't want you to confirm it for me. Now, me personally, the first question I would have asked is, the second you found out, what did you do? Are the reports that you were gleeful and you were happy that people were fighting for you and taking it to those people who weren't standing up for you? Is that true? And, like I said, he just rambled on a little bit. There was no real answer other than that it's the Democrats' fault for not telling us what Donald Trump did, which I believe is a reason we need to call witnesses. Let me just throw that out. Evidently, we didn't get enough answers. We need witnesses. Mitt Romney followed up. He said, when President Trump sent the disparaging tweet at 2:24 p.m. regarding Vice President Pence, was he aware that the vice president had been removed from the Senate by the Secret Service for his safety? The question was read by the clerk. Again, Mr. Van der Veen, nowhere near the answer. In fact, what he said, the answer is no. At no point was the president informed that the vice president was in any danger because the House rushed through this impeachment in 7 days with no evidence. So I struggle over reading that transition because at no point was the president informed that the vice president was in any danger. Because how did you make that transition that he didn't know that Trump knew of Pence being in danger, and then immediately going to the House rushed through the impeachment in 7 days with no evidence? There's nothing at all in the record on this point, because the House failed to do even the minimum due diligence. What the president did know, there was a violent riot happening at the Capitol, he said. That's why he repeatedly called via tweet, and via video for the riots to stop. Did he really call for them to stop? I mean, I think we saw the comment, yeah, maybe stop. But hey, remember this day always. You're great Americans. Crazy. Now, what we find out is that, and this is what's been reported by the Washington Post, at 2:15, Trump was informed that a mob was after Mike Pence, that they were chanting, hang Mike Pence. His number two was running for his life. And what does Donald Trump send out? A mere 9 minutes later, Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do what should have been done to protect our country and our Constitution. I'm sorry. That doesn't sound like bringing down the temperature. That doesn't sound like coming to Mike Pence's defense. That doesn't sound like, I don't know, anything a sane, rational person would say when an angry mob is chasing the person you're saying something about. This sounds to me like, yeah, go get him. Maybe you can change his mind. And it gets even crazier. It does. Trust me, it gets even crazier. And Marco Rubio, the Republican from Florida, asked about whether this impeachment trial is going to set a new precedent. He asked the question, is it not true that under this new precedent facing calls to lock her up, a future House could impeach a former Secretary of State and potentially disqualify her from any future office? Now, obviously, the former Secretary of State and the her that he's talking to about the lock her up is Hillary Clinton. And why you got Hillary on the brain in this moment, no freaking clue. Other than maybe you're trying to score points with Donald Trump because, and with the base, because everybody hates Hillary, right? And Mr. Van der Veen, evidently our latest constitutional scholar, seems to go, yeah. If you see it their way, yes. We could preemptively impeach someone who's never held the freaking office. And you go, hold on. Did you miss the part that he was president? He was impeached while still in office, while still president. He was impeached, and Mitch McConnell let everybody go home. Did we miss that part? Did we miss that part where he was still in office when this was going on? And the answer is yes. This major distraction. And the weird thing is I actually saw some right-wing stories in the right-wing blogosphere talking about how this is going to be a weapon that the Republicans use, to go after Hillary and to go after others. And I'm going, you gotta hold office to be impeached. Now, the argument is he's out of office now. Why are we doing this? Again, I go back to statement A. When he was impeached, and I'll say it slowly, when he was impeached, he was in office. Mitch McConnell chose to do the most Mitch McConnell thing ever and drag his feet, which is why we didn't have this while he was still in office. I made the argument the morning after. So on January 6th, into the morning of the 7th, the second that they certified Joe Biden as president, the article of impeachment should have been right there at 4:01 a.m. on that Thursday morning. Should have been passed out of the House that afternoon, and the Senate should have had to take it up that Friday. And he should have been removed. But we're not that functional of a country. And we don't have a Republican Party that has the courage to do anything even remotely close to that. And look, what these days of impeachment trial, this impeachment trial has showed us, there aren't a lot of profiles in courage on the right side of our political spectrum. No profiles in courage in the Republican Party right now. So it's another one of those moments where you go, wow, we're getting nothing out of them. But like I said yesterday, the reality is half of them are complicit. Half of them pushed the big lie. Half of them held on to, it was rigged. It was the most rigged election ever. The votes were stolen. That's insane. The good thing is it all resumes again tomorrow. Yay, we get more. And there's talk of witnesses. Oh, I can't wait. I hope there are witnesses, don't you? I'd like to start with Mike Pence. Excuse me, Mr. Former Vice President. How does it feel to know that you got number 2'd? And not just by the guy who defecated in the hallway. I'd love to hear his thoughts on it. The fact that, at 2:15, Trump was told, hey, Mike's running for his life. Mike's my number 2. He's been there every step of the way for me. He's done everything for me except, this one little thing like, be the face of the coup. And then we got to, look, I want tons of witnesses. Bring in Lindsey Graham, bring in Leaky Rudy, Sidney Powell. I'd love to hear from her. Lynn Wood. We could go down all of them, half the jurors. Let's get all of them. Let's get their testimony. But sadly, I don't foresee it. We'll see. I'm hoping, especially given the fact that now I got to hear from Kevin McCarthy, because now there's information that's breaking that there was a shouting match between Trump and McCarthy as the riot is going on. McCarthy's on the phone, saying, and this is how it's been reported that Trump told Kevin McCarthy, the Republican House leader, well, Kevin, I guess these people are more upset about the election than you are. You think? He's trying to save his own life. And I got to be honest, there's a weird sadistic part of me that would have loved to have seen what would have happened if we could war game this out, if they would have gotten a hold of Kevin McCarthy. I mean, I got to wonder, would they have strung him up? I mean, he's their guy. He was Trump's guy. Would they have even known any different? Evidently, McCarthy then responded, who in the blank do you think you're talking to? And then it devolved, I guess, from there. I think we need to know what that conversation was. For me, all of this is about the minute that he fired those people at the Capitol. And remember, he said he's going with them. Where did he go? What was he doing? What actions did he take? Who did he call? Who did he talk to? I want all those answers. It's what we need to be doing. Now the sad part, and this is, I guess, the scary part of where we are in this country. Virtually nobody's watching. Virtually nobody's paying attention to this. CNN and MSNBC, their viewership are way up. People like me are watching, because this is what I do. But the vast majority of people not. In fact, CNN and MSNBC actually are beating Fox most of the time in viewers, because the Fox viewers are going, all we're going to hear about is Trump's treason, and he's our guy, and we don't want. Not on Fox, mind you, because Fox is talking about, what was it, the cat, something about a cat lawyer or something, some nonsense. That on Wednesday, when CNN is number one in the 25 to 54 demographic, and MSNBC has more total viewers than everybody, only one side of the political spectrum is watching. The right is, and the right are where the people who need to pay attention to this. And sadly, it's not, because Fox viewers are, well, truthfully, they're going to Newsmax. They're leaving Fox. They're going to OAN. They're going to these crazier conservative news outlets because, well, they're even worse. And, you look at this and you go, as a country, are we pulling farther apart? I look at this moment as treason, you would think. Sedition, you would think. Something that would pull us together, that we could band around and go, bad. Shouldn't do that. Not a good thing for our country, not a good thing for democracy. We're against it. Not happening. Not happening in the way that you would expect. And I've said all along that it's going to be the Republican Party that has to save this republic. They're the ones who are going to have to find the courage. They're the ones who are going to have to find the spine and backbone. These are going to be who are going to have to be the statesmen. And sadly, as of right now, they're not. And I've had a bunch of people go, Rick, I got positive signs. They're going to convict. I'm going, no. They're not going to convict. I see no way. And now look, my next guest, I'm sure, is gonna tell us, yes, we're gonna convict it, and there's gonna be all this great stuff. And I hope he's right. Hope I'm wrong. I just don't see it. I don't see there being 17 Republicans in the Senate to step forward and go, yeah, this is what we need to do. We need to cleanse ourselves of this. Because if no other reason, I think there are, 20 of them up for election in 2022? And they're all little, oops, we don't want to lose our seats. Scary, scary times we live in, my friends. But if you can't agree that now this is somebody you need to hold accountable, I don't know what brings us together. I don't know what unites us. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, our good friend Scott Dworkin is going to be here. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show.
Nothing more American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1909. That was the day the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People was founded. During the early years of the 20th century, the NAACP developed legal strategies to challenge anti-black violence and segregation. W.E.B. Du Bois, Ida B. Wells, Archibald Grimke, and Florence Kelley were just a few of the white and black intellectuals and activists who founded the organization. They sensed the urgency for a civil rights organization in the wake of the 1908 race riot in Springfield, Illinois. They hoped to combat the rapid growth of lynchings and Jim Crow statutes. Membership ballooned to almost 90,000 in less than 10 years, with more than 50 branches nationwide. These leaders opposed the gradualism of Booker T. Washington and fought to convince whites of the need for racial equality. The NAACP investigated lynchings and targeted voter disenfranchisement and segregation through a series of lawsuits. They established a legal defense fund that organized support for the Scottsboro Boys and similar cases. They undertook the campaign to overturn the separate but equal doctrine of Plessy versus Ferguson. This resulted in the 1954 landmark decision, Brown versus Board of Education. The NAACP played a central role in the civil rights movement, with Rosa Parks as its secretary. They helped to organize the Montgomery bus boycott, were centrally involved in the campaign to integrate schools in Little Rock, Arkansas, and mobilized for the 1963 March on Washington for jobs and freedom. They also worked successfully toward the 1964 Civil Rights Act and the 1965 Voting Rights Act. The NAACP continues its important advocacy work today with some 425,000 members.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So here's some interesting stuff. John Thune, the number two Republican in the Senate, he said that he might be open to censoring Trump. And you go, where were you? What, a month ago when that guy from Virginia was throwing this out there? I guess maybe this is a way of maybe trying to find a soul, or maybe it's just another major distraction from the reality that they're a bunch of cowards or complicit. As I said, there are two reasons why you're going to vote to not convict him. You're a coward or you're complicit. There are no other answers for me. But here to share some thoughts on the top news of the day and our fun day of impeachment, our good friend Scott Dworkin, co-founder of the Democratic Coalition, also host of the fabulous Dworkin Report. Scott, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, how are you?
So what do you think, censor? Thune has this grand idea, thinks it might have some legs.
He's trying to distract from the fact that Trump incited an insurrection. And, or I can put it a different way. Trump helped organize a terrorist attack on the Capitol, and where 7 people died, including 3 police officers, and 140 officers were seriously injured that we know of as of right now. Countless trauma between dozens of my friends that work on the Hill on both sides of the party. A lot of friends are turning in their resignation letters because they can't go there anymore. They have panic attacks when they walk near the building. So, they can distract all they want, but anyone who votes not guilty is indicting themselves as well.
Now, Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins asked the question that I think everybody, well, at least I wanted to know, and that is, what did Trump do? When did he do? What did he know? When did he know it? What did he do? That whole line. And Trump's lawyer, Mr. Van der Veen, he just blamed the Democrats. It's their fault. It's our fault. And I'll give him credit. He's probably a really good lawyer. He didn't bother to ask the question because he probably didn't want to know the answer.
And people should recognize the dereliction of duty as a crime in itself. And also that anybody who conspired with him in the dereliction of duty is also open to a criminal prosecution due to this. And so one thing I want to remind everybody is it's not over just with the impeachment trial. This will be investigated thoroughly. We will get to the bottom of this. A mix of press and Congress will make sure that they'll look into it. And I'm sure that the DOJ is going to look into it as well.
So let's get to the big question, because I don't see him being convicted. I don't see there being people of conscience stepping forward. Let's get that out of the way. Do you think there's a possibility that he's convicted?
He already was convicted by the American people.
Right.
And that's where the court that matters. He'll never have a role in public life ever again. And I think that's what's important here, is nobody's going to want to touch him. He's too toxic for the rest of his life.
What do you say to the person then, Scott, who says, nobody's paying attention to this? The numbers are, the Nielsen numbers are out. Nobody's really watching this. And the Democrats didn't do the smart thing and put this on during prime time when people could actually consume it. That this is happening, but nobody's really paying attention to it.
Everybody sees it. Everybody sees what's going on. It's nobody's really hiding, unless you're a very avid Trump fan and you're standing by his side. Then you're living in Newsback's world right now. But people are paying attention. After day one, most had seen enough, if they hadn't already seen enough. And remember, a lot of Americans are traumatized by this as well. They're scared it's going to happen in their city, and in their town, and they don't want it to be next, because, what if Trump localizes this and turns it into, next, I don't like people in North Carolina, so I'm going to go to the Raleigh state capitol, and all of my national friends, you should come down there and we should mob the Capitol. And just the threat of that can shut down a city. And, you know, this is costing us money. We're talking about $500 million spending on Capitol security. Now, Capitol security always should have been beefed up to this sort of level, to be real about it. It was not lax, but it should have done more, you know, before. But, you know, we're here, so we have the opportunity now to make it so that it's more protected than ever, and that'll ensure that, you know, it never happens again. But I don't think in our lifetime something like this will happen again in the Capitol building, because I think it'll be protected for the rest of our lives.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I mean, Lindsey Graham was reported saying yesterday that he believes that the Capitol Police should have used deadly force, that he's mad at them for not. Should that have happened? I mean, everybody who walked in, should they have just mowed them down?
I think that due to the experience and the military backgrounds of the Capitol Police, very distinguished officers, most of them have served in combat before. I think that, you know, their restraint was a result of their training, because if they were, you know, state trooper or local cop, no offense to my friends that are, but I would say that they wouldn't have the same restraint. You saw professionals in there that were managing the crisis situation the best that they could when they were fighting against the president of the United States. And that just, the whole thing is crazy. You know, I always think of situations like this as what happened is what happened. And I don't want to talk away from it. I also have wondered, I will say that as a former body man for politicians, that there's a red line. And sadly, Ashley Babbitt crossed that red line. And I think one thing we should keep in mind is that, you know, Pence, if they had gotten closer to him, they would have had the capability to defend him. If they had gotten closer to Speaker Pelosi, same thing. But members of Congress, they had no protection. They were not safe at all. Those two key officials had ample protection. But again, you know, if you have hundreds of people rushing the door, who knows what can happen. And if they have nothing to lose and they're going to lose their democracy and they think they're going to lose everything, and they've been following this cult leader the whole time, and he gave me this excuse to be lawless and enter the Capitol, and he gave me the invitation here, and then you realize that it's just another Trump scam, and you're stuck in there, and now you're in federal prison.
No, it's important what you just laid out there, because I think Jamie Raskin and the Democrats did a pretty good job of explaining that mentality. That people really honestly and truthfully took it to their core, that their entire way of life was being taken from them, that their democracy was under attack, and that they did have license from the president to do whatever and however they had to do to stop this vote from happening. And I think that needs to get through even more.
Yeah, and they knew what they were doing. You know, these dog whistles and these winks and nods, you know, the only reason he talked about peaceful at all was so he could use it as further cover now. And like, that's the only reason he mentioned it in his speech at all. We knew what he was saying. He was getting go to the Capitol, cause as big of a disturbance as you possibly can. That's why he didn't stop it, because he wanted them to take over the Capitol. He wanted them to kill people. We have to admit that and confront that fact. And I think Republicans are straight up in denial of the fact that he would have been okay if they were all killed. And I think that's one thing that we need to assess overall, is that Trump would have been okay with them somehow overtaking the Capitol. Again, logistically, it didn't make any sense in regards to the seat of power and how it would work. They could have, you know, taken down the entire Capitol and it still wouldn't have transferred to him. But he could have somehow, you know, maneuvered around and done things like martial law and acted like, oh, we need to have a new election because obviously there was fraud, and look at this attack on the Capitol that had nothing to do with, but the Patriots took it over, and it just, the Trump snowball would keep on rolling downhill. So thankfully we had a lot of people fighting for our country, fighting for our country in the way that, you know, legally and also speaking to the American people, and you know, luckily we have good fighters on our side. I think, again, in the political realm, you know, I've been in campaigns since 2003 now, and I just, dominoes fall, and anybody who makes this vote, doesn't matter what state you live in, this is one of those votes where it will haunt you for the rest of your life. It will be your legacy. It will be everything you're known for. And the parallels between what you'll be called in regards to being a traitor, because this is another sort of 9/11 on us, on top of the fact that we have the coronavirus deaths around this. I mean, there's so much trauma right now. The smoke hasn't cleared, but when it does, people in every state will want to not associate themselves with anybody who associated themselves with Trump. Because imagine this, not only these crimes, but look at what else we're going to uncover between now and months from now. And I just think that it would be really, really, and I don't use this word often, but stupid for anybody to think that I'm going to have Trump's back and that there's not going to be crimes coming out from that White House over the next few months and the next few years. Because I'm telling you, there are dozens of investigations open right now just on the Hill. So I don't know what's happening to DOJ, but I'm guessing it's not going to be patty cake time. Like, they're going to come after these people legally in every possible way. So I look for, after this trial, I would look for Trump being criminally charged. In Georgia specifically, if not New York City. So
then if we don't get witnesses in this trial, you believe we're going to get witnesses in the next?
And that's the thing is I believe there will be a criminal trial that's surrounding this, probably in Georgia, if not at the federal level. Most likely it would be in Georgia. And I think he'll have to actually face the music, if not, facing a misdemeanor charge in D.C., for incitement as well, but that's a tougher hill to climb. So I think Georgia's pretty straightforward, and there's an extortion or blackmail sort of threat in there as well. And these are not people who mess around. At the same time, he's incited violence in the cities where they're prosecuting him from. So I would find it interesting to see where this goes. But I would say that it's almost a certainty that he's going to be charged, with crimes between now and the next month. It's almost a certainty.
Well, we'll see where that goes. But, I want to hear from Kevin McCarthy now, because I'm sure you saw the story that's been breaking today, that there was a phone call as the riot is happening between Trump and McCarthy. And basically Trump saying, hey, well, they care about me more than you do, which is, I don't know that that's the right thing to be saying to somebody when their life is in danger. But I would be interested to see him under oath, testify to what happened in that phone call.
Sounds like a threat. That sounds like a threat to me, where it's like, seems like they care more about it. And, that's why I'm going to take care of them. That's why they're going to take care of you for me. This is all a mob.
It's all mob talk. It is.
This is how he's always been. And he's had mob affiliations for the past 40 years, directly from his dad. They had concrete that was pouring from the mob. They had AC, Atlantic City, for the mob. You had Trump being an informant for the FBI, mob related as well. You have the Russian mob being busted in Trump Tower with a racketeering organization a floor below where he lived. And so, he is a mobster. And I think, again, we need to confront the fact that he was okay if people were killed. And he, obviously that's truth, but he would have been okay with everybody being killed in that building. And I think we need to recognize that he will do this again. This is not something, just because he's out of office, it doesn't mean he's incapable. This is actually more dangerous now, because people think that they've accomplished something. They're assessing where they can hit next. And so they'll probably look at a soft target in a city that we're not focused on, with a governor of somebody they don't like, that they want to attack, that went after Trump or prosecuted him. And then we're going to have to deal with it in that city. So we have to stop it here before it spreads to local areas across the country, because if he takes that national audience and focuses it on, I'm angry about Atlanta because they're charging me with this. I mean, he can cause riots easily. He doesn't need social media to do that. He can rile people up on his own. He can talk to his Flynn brother generals and ask his help from Blackwater and people like that. This is scary sort of stuff, and people should take it absolutely seriously. There's no reason not to take it seriously. Right. And so my hope is that he's criminally charged for every crime that he's committed. And obviously we have a list, so we're going to be pursuing it from every angle.
No, I mean, this is, you brought up really the most important part of all this is all the organizing that's been going on in these militia groups, the Oath Keepers, the Three Percenters, the Boogaloo Boys, all of these crazy groups that are out there. They're organizing together. They've gone back underground, and you're right. The fear is that they do take on a softer target. They do, overtake a capital somewhere again, as they've done out west with the Bundy folks. Yeah, I mean, this is troublesome. So, how do you get the Republican Party to come around? Because I've been saying for the longest time, the only way we save this country is if there are some Republicans of conscience to step forward and say, we're going to stop this. And then this is that moment where you need more than just a handful. You need a good portion of the Republican Party to say, no, this isn't who we are. Do you see that happening?
I think they'll reflect in the polling, the abysmal polling that Trump has. They'll act like they never met him. I give that a month until Cheney and Kinzinger are the leaders of the Republican Party, the people who didn't touch the hot potato or commit treason. I would see them starting to take over the party because it's the only credible path that they have for a party. And I would see major donors seeing that very clearly, that anybody who is a Marjorie Taylor Greene of the party is an untouchable at this point and should not be interacted with. I will tell you this, as a Browns fan, I am not a person who forgets or gives up. And with these people that have committed seditious acts within our government, we took on Trump for 5 years. And so any of the reps or senators that, think that it's a great idea to stay in office, go ahead and do so. But if you are corrupt and you've committed crimes, then we will legally pursue every avenue available to make sure that you're prosecuted for whatever we can possibly find, because if there are crimes that were committed. And I can tell you this, I have investigated everybody in Trump's circle, and I haven't found one person that hasn't committed a crime. Not one. Well, except for, apologies, Rod Rosenstein was the one person, and I guess Robert Mueller, but he's not in his circle. But Rod Rosenstein was the one kind of Boy Scout seeming person, and then obviously he committed crimes during the end of the Trump protest.
Last question I've got for you, because in this frame that it's going to be the Republicans who save us. Unfortunately, I look at these stories coming out about the Lincoln Project. Now the co-founder has resigned. I guess you had sexual harassment allegations. I guess it was last week. They seem to be in a little chaos.
Sure, it's that's their organization. That's on them. That's not how I run my organization. I'm not sure exactly what went on fully, and I'm not trying to deny or deflect or anything like that. But I wouldn't have ignored that. I would never ignore anything like that. And in the 20 years that I've been in politics, I would never look over that or try to cover that up. That person would be terminated immediately with cause, and then an immediate investigation would be then implemented by a third party outside, and a law firm would then do an assessment of the situation. You have a compliance person to make sure that the financials are in order. There's a lot of ducks that you get in a row for that, but there's a zero tolerance for that kind of stuff, because otherwise it spins out of control like it is right now. And it's sad to see, but they were Kurt Bardella is a phenomenal guy, and he's still with them, and so I think that they might be able to recover, but it's going to be some hard times for them right now, and I don't feel bad for them about that.
I'm with you, Scott. I appreciate the time, man. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Our good friend Scott Dworkin. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. Where working people come to talk.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1913. That was the day that the labor leader known as Mother Jones was arrested in West Virginia. She was there to support coal miners during the Paint and Cabin Creek strike of 1912-1913. The West Virginia coal fields were one of the bloodiest sites of labor conflict in U.S. history. The bosses had evicted the striking workers from their company homes. As a result, the strikers lived in tent camps under dire conditions. 83-year-old Mother Jones visited these camps where she gave fiery speeches. In the fall, she organized a march of the miners' children through the streets of Charleston, West Virginia. Authorities saw Mother Jones as a troublemaker and wanted to expel her from their state. On February 7th, guards hired by the bosses attacked one of the minor camps with a machine gun mounted on an armored train. One striker died. The workers responded with an attack of their own, thus giving the governor the excuse to declare martial law. Mother Jones was arrested and put on trial for murder at a military court. The basis for her arrest was a speech she had given 3 months earlier. Mother Jones refused to recognize the authority of the trial, writing in her autobiography that my arrest and trial were unconstitutional. She was convicted and sentenced to 20 years. It was during this trial that Mother Jones was called the most dangerous woman in America. The sentence of this well-known labor leader spurred national outrage. The United States Senate ordered an investigation into the conditions of the West Virginia coal mines. West Virginians elected a new governor who released the beloved Mother Jones. Upon her release, she continued fighting for workers until the day she died at 100 years old. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So during this time of the impeachment, when all the attention is where it's at, as we're looking at the fact that you have all this mind on what's going on in D.C., what's going on with Trump. The state of Tennessee has decided that now is the time to put a no rights at work amendment on their constitution. That's right. You will never get away from right to work, Tennessee. And it got me thinking today about this whole no rights at work agenda. And it got me thinking about the National Labor Relations Act and why right now the PRO Act being passed is so important. And a little aside, even if Tennessee does get it into their constitution, federal law will supersede that. And the question becomes this is one of these weird moments where elections do have consequences and how the Supreme Court's going to go. This is one of those weird, kind of strange moments that I think people need to be prepared for. Because if Tennessee does get it in their constitution, and the federal government does get the PRO Act passed that undoes the horrible effects of Taft-Hartley and does away with this whole no rights at work nonsense, it's going to end up going to court. And where is it going to end up going? It's going to end up going to the Supreme Court. And the same way that the Wagner Act, the National Labor Relations Act, was ruled constitutional and overrode the whole idea of freedom of contract or liberty of contract, the whole Lochner era nonsense, was because the Supreme Court said it's constitutional. I now worry that a 6-3 crazy right-wing corporate court would rule that labor laws are unconstitutional, reciting those Lochner era liberty of contract or freedom of contract arguments. It's your freedom to work in deplorable conditions for poverty wages because it's your choice. You made that choice. Granted, you didn't have a choice. There was no choice because it is what it is. But I thought for a second that, my mind went back to the original National Labor Relations Act. And originally, the NLRA was about giving people the right to join and form unions. It was a way for the government to stop the labor wars that were going on, to have industrial peace, and for workers to better their conditions. As a labor guy, I'm a fan of, open the books. Let's see how much wealth that our labor created, and we want a portion. Don't want it all. We don't want you to go out of business, but we want a portion of it. And it worked really well. All the way up until 1947 when Republicans rammed through Taft-Hartley over a Harry Truman veto. And Taft-Hartley undid some of the things that the NLRA did from the beginning. It prohibited closed shops. The original NLRA let you have a closed shop, which meant everybody that worked there had to be a member. Had to be a dues-paying member. And what that did is it brought people together. There was some solidarity, a working class that had the same kind of ideas. Republicans hate that. So immediately you got to divide and conquer. You got to get some of those people in there who are anti-union that the boss can hire in to cause dissension in the ranks. So they immediately said, sorry, you the employer and the employees, you cannot, in your workplace as a matter of law, you cannot negotiate for a closed shop. It's illegal for you to do this. And then what it did is it allowed states to pass, this no rights at work nonsense by eliminating and prohibiting agency shop, which means that even if you're not a member of the union, that you got to pay for the organizing, the negotiating, and the enforcement of the contracts. No free riders. You don't get a free lunch. You got to pay for the services and the things that you get. So they brought in this all right to work nonsense and said, no, you don't have to do that. You can be a freeloader, which is why the southern states all have abysmal union density rates. Because even in the places where there are unions and there are people paying dues, you got a ton of free riders who don't contribute and will suck off of the benefits that their co-workers fight for. And there are a bunch of other things that Taft-Hartley did. It defined, narrowly defined unfair labor practices, whereas before it was all about the employer, stopping the employer from doing horrible things. And it then began specifying practices that the unions were doing as unfair. And you go, well, that was horrible and it was bad. And you go, yeah, it was terrible. Right to work banned both closed shops and agency shops. You could literally have people who were benefiting off of the fight that the unions did and not paying a dime for it and receiving all the benefits. And we all know what happens when that happens. Everything goes straight to pot, which is why the southern states are lower wage states. They have less health insurance coverage. They have lower pension rates. They have unsafe work conditions, all of that stuff. You fast forward from 1947 after Taft-Hartley to 1959, you got Landrum Griffith. Landrum Griffith, an amendment to the Wagner Act, banned secondary boycotts, which meant if this company went on strike, in the old days, this company would too say, no, we're not touching their stuff. You settle with them and then we'll talk. That's illegal now. Also banned and limited a number of the picketing rights. So again, squeezing what workers can do, squeezing the confines of what they're able to do. And then you fast forward to 2018, when our Supreme Court, our illustrious Supreme Court, stolen Supreme Court, made the decision in Janus versus AFSCME that basically said, for all public sector workers across the country, there's no such thing as agency shop. You all can be freeloaders. You've all got the right to freeload. And one of the things that I said about Joe Biden that I hope he does is he passes the PRO Act, which is going to undo some of those really horrible things. Because you look at what's going on in Alabama right now. This Amazon plant in Alabama, they're organizing, and it's a small union, RSWD, the Retail and Warehouse Workers Union. Very small union, an offshoot. I guess they're affiliated with the UFCW, a bigger union. But every time you hear a story coming out, it's how Amazon has brought in these high-powered union busters. They're spending, millions of dollars, in advertising, to harass the heck out of these workers. In fact, you can't even go to the bathroom. You cannot even go to the bathroom without being hammered with anti-union propaganda. They're being pulled into captive audience meetings. They're being harassed constantly on the job. And look, it shouldn't be this way. One of the things the National Labor Relations Act set out to do was to ensure that there was something of a level playing field, that workers got a leg up so that they could bargain for better wages, hours, conditions. That was the goal in all this. That was the goal. And had we maintained the 35% union density that we had in the 1960s, through today, we would have a much more prosperous working class. Many more of us would be much better off. I tell the story when I started working in the freight industry back more than 30 years ago. Reality, I was making much more money back then. Started off at $14 an hour, worked up to 15. Top rate would have been, I think, 18 and some change. Back in the late 80s, early 90s. Today, that job is it pays $25. Starts off at 16, pays 25 now. And you go, wow, that's an advancement. No, not really. Not when you consider for inflation, that job would be paying close to $40 an hour. Had we just kept up with inflation. And it hasn't. It's all been eroded. And this is how the redistribution of wealth in this country has happened. We've continually given tax breaks to the very wealthy, continually given corporate America loopholes and tax breaks to not pay taxes, and it's all shifted to us. So not only are our wages going down, our health care is getting worse, our retirement security is gone, and we're paying higher taxes and more fees just to exist. While we have a billionaire class who has done better than at any point in the history of civilization. And now you have a moment where there's some talk of raising the minimum wage to a meager $15 an hour. And all what's breaking loose. Corporate America losing their mind. The media structure going, oh, but we're going to lose jobs. The Washington Post gave Joe Biden 2 Pinocchios for his claim that the minimum wage would be $15 an hour had it kept up with inflation. That's not true. And I've said this before, the minimum wage would be, they say $12.25, I say $12.52, because when I did the BLM calculator, you can do it online as well. Go to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and they've got an inflation calculator. You can put $15 in the year and all that, and it will give you a number. Here's the thing. We're arguing whether $15 an hour is true, and we're giving you Pinocchios. What they didn't bother to mention anywhere in their 2 Pinocchios argument is that the current minimum wage is still $5 less than what they've pointed out. So, okay, I'll take the $12.25. And I'm sure every person who's working for minimum wage would have as well. Which is why I keep saying we've got to tie this stuff to inflation so that everyone does better when everyone does better. That nobody falls behind. That work matters. I hear people tell me all the time, well, Rick, nobody has work ethic anymore, not like we used to in the old days. And I'm going, wow, I love your revisionist history, because I knew a lot of young, really lazy people when I was a kid. They were there then too. And I know it's part of getting older that we like to idealize, we were superior. No, we weren't. We were just as lazy, just as stupid, did the same dumb things, only with less technology. They've figured out how to be a little bit smarter in their sloth. But we had stronger unions. We benefited from what our grandparents and our parents' generation fought for and maintained. What we've done to our children is criminal. What we've done to the kids of today is criminal. You're going to tell me that you want somebody to have a work ethic when they can't survive on the wages that they earn? It's ridiculous. And the thing is we can't even have a conversation around what the minimum wage should be, or ideas that we could, somehow figure out how to get people to be able to afford to live. Look, I'm not someone who says it has to be $15 an hour. Personally, I'm okay with using a leveling mechanism. If you really believe that this is going to cost small employers their jobs, I'm worth having a conversation of how we change that, how we have some redistributive policies to help shore up the bottom so that every person who wants a job has one, and that job has the dignity of respect of being able to afford to live. I'm willing to talk about anything. Personally, I'm not a big fan of the minimum wage. I don't want just minimum. I think everybody should be a union member. I think everybody should sit down and negotiate with the boss. And here's what they don't want. And this is one of the things that corporate America is so afraid of. That we're going to get this idea in their head, like I've been talking about for years, that, I'm not worried about the minimum. I'm worried about how much you made off of my labor. Let's open those books. Let's sit down. Let's find out how much you're making. Let's audit those books and then say, hey, we don't want it all. We don't want it all, but we want our share of it. And we demand our share of it. Because sure as shine, the second you start to lose money, you're going to come back and look for concessions. We've seen that happen. We've seen that movie over and over again. So for me, when times are good, we sit down, we negotiate, and we say, hey, things are good. You got extra cheese on your Whopper? We want some too. It's not that difficult. And at the end of this, while the Democrats are stuck with Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin, who now the minimum wage is going to be out of the budget reconciliation bill. For me, the push is getting people the power to sit down and negotiate it, getting people the power to say, you know what? We're not begging anymore. We're demanding. We're empowered to step forward, stand up, speak out, and demand that our wealth be rewarded by our work. That what we do matters. And that's a major, major mindset change than what we've had for the last 30, 40 years. We need to change our thinking to say, you know what? We got a lot of billionaires. We want to do well too. And our labor should get us there. We shouldn't have to work in poverty for the chance of maybe we win the lottery. Oh boy, somebody's going to win. Might be me. It's not. So I'm a little miffed at the Washington Post because they got him. They got Joe. Joe lied. Two Pinocchios. He had the audacity to say that he believes that, had the minimum wage kept up with inflation since 1968, it'd be $15. Yeah, he was $2.75 off. I think that's a huge difference than what we had from the last administration. I think it's a huge difference than what we get from the corporate mouthpieces who say this is going to be the end of the economy and a teenager will never get a job again and there'll be no more low-wage workers. It's all going to be automated tomorrow. Nonsense. We've raised the minimum wage multiple times in this country. Multiple times. There are states across this country. There are cities across this country who have raised it to $15 an hour and above. And you know what? All of the doomsday scenarios, all of the sky is falling, all of that stuff didn't happen. A lot of people looking for it, waiting, hoping. Didn't happen. In fact, what we've found out from studies, when the minimum wage goes up, people have a little bit more money in their pocket. And what do they do with it? As my grandmother always said, it's going to burn a hole in your pocket. And it burns a hole in your pocket. You go out and you spend it. And what does that do? That creates more jobs. Creates economic activity because those corporations, they want your money. They want your profit. And if they got to pay a little extra for the workers to service you, they're going to do that. It's just common sense. Just like the whole no rights at work agenda is bad for us, that's common sense too. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1880. Labor leader John L. Lewis was born in a company mining town outside of Lucas, Iowa. His father was a Welsh coal miner, and young Lewis followed in his footsteps, entering the Big Hill mine in Lucas at the age of 17. He became a union leader and served as the president of the United Mine Workers of America from 1920 to 1960. Under his leadership, the United Mine Workers became one of the leading unions in the nation. Lewis was an aggressive fighter and strike leader who gained higher wages for his membership while steamrolling his opponents. A thunderous speaker, Time magazine once referred to him as the Lion of the labor movement. In 1935, Lewis and 8 other leaders formed the Committee for Industrial Relations within the American Federation of Labor. Lewis believed it was essential to the future of the labor movement to organize steelworkers. This put the committee at odds with the craft union-dominated AFL. The disagreement eventually led to the CIO splitting from the AFL. The CIO helped establish the United Steelworkers of America and helped organize millions of other industrial workers in the 1930s. Lewis played a major role in helping President Franklin Delano Roosevelt win a landslide re-election in 1936. During World War II, most unions took a no-strike pledge. Lewis was never one to let public opinion get in the way of what he thought was right. He led several strikes during the war, causing public outrage. In 1964, President Lyndon Johnson awarded Lewis the Presidential Medal of Freedom. John L. Lewis is most often remembered for the quote, "The workers of the nation were tired of waiting for the corporate industry to right their economic wrongs, to alleviate their social agony, and to grant them their political rights. Despairing of fair treatment, they resolved to do something for themselves." Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
The renowned Western swing band leader Bob Wills would joyously call out in mid-song, "Take it away, Leon," bringing on a crowd-pleasing instrumental solo by steel guitar maestro Leon McAuliffe. But now comes another Leon who's such an off-key, screechy Wall Street billionaire that crowds are shouting, "Go away, Leon." He is hedge fund huckster Leon Cooperman, who first gained public notoriety when he compared Barack Obama's election to Hitler's rise to power, and he later was dubbed Crybaby Cooperman after he got all teary-eyed during a TV interview in which he decried the vilification of billionaires. The sad rich man was weeping about Senator Elizabeth Warren's proposal to make the uber-rich pay a modest surtax on the excessive fortunes of money manipulators like him. For a while, Leon did go away. But this January, the whiner was back on TV, blaming stock market gyrations on manipulations by people, quote, "sitting at home getting their pandemic checks from the government." Then he plunged again into deep self-pity, deploring the likelihood that Biden will join Senator Warren's call for the rich to pay their fair share of taxes. "This fair share is a bullshit concept," he wailed. "It's just a way of attacking wealthy people." Then he appealed to the real victims of the pandemic to rally behind billionaires like him. "We make the world, quote, a substantially better place with our donations to charity," he asserted, pleading for public gratitude and exclaiming, "We all got to work together." This is Jim Hightower saying, "Together? While working class and poor people have been knocked down, cut off, and stomped on in the past year, America's 651 billionaires, including Cooperman, have collectively jacked up their wealth by $1 trillion, an average of $1.5 billion each."
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So as I said the other day, I'm thrilled to find out that day one of the Biden administration, they fired Peter Robb and his number two at the National Labor Relations Board. I'm going, yeah. And the reports coming out, hundreds of the patronage jobs are being unfilled unceremoniously, which, again, very thrilled about. But one of the ones I'd like to see someone fired tomorrow. In fact, can we still do it today? Louis DeJoy, the Postmaster General. Evidently, Louis, he thinks it's a good idea to put all of the first-class mail on one delivery track on that 3 to 5 day window, which is going to slow down the first-class delivery. And also, he wants to jack up the price a little bit. So you're going to get worse service for higher cost. And you think about this and you go, it kind of sounds like they're really trying to break the post office. And when you couple that with the fact that they've been dying to privatize it, this sounds like part of the plan. Break it, make it cheap, sell it off for pennies to your buddies, or supposedly Louis got some tentacles in this, maybe even to himself, so that they can be Amazon's delivery boy, and then the rest of us, well, we pay through the nose. Sad stuff. So Joe Biden, if you're listening, fire the bum. Send DeJoy to jail. That's where we should be going. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on a little bit of the postal story and the top stories of the day. I'm bringing back the professor, our good friend Brett Pransky. Brett, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, thanks for having me back.
So, Mr. Professor, thoughts on DeJoy and the post office?
Well, it certainly does sound like they're trying to break it. And to be honest, this isn't the first time. I can't remember exactly how the story went, but it was several years ago where the government came along and forced the post office to fund its pension for some ridiculous amount of time into the future. And the entire thing was designed to turn the post office from I think before it was the only money-making government entity that existed anywhere.
And that would have been
just to force them
2006
into the red so that they could call it some type of drain on the government.
What would have been 2006, Alex. And it was the Bush administration who said that, no, you need to fund your stuff 75 years into the future. You need to fund health care and pension obligations for workers who aren't even born yet. And they did. They stashed away billions of dollars, and I would argue needlessly, so that they could basically break the post office.
Yeah, and this appears just to be the latest attempt at that. This time, it looks like they're going after hearts and minds. They're going to try to make the American people fall out of love with the post office by delivering worse service at higher prices, and this is the kind of thing that some businesses will do sometimes. They will intentionally lose money in order to drive other competition out of the market. And this is kind of like that running in reverse.
Yep.
They're going to try to dismantle the post office through these means so that they can break it up, sell it off. And if I remember right, I think DeJoy has a personal financial stake in the competition to the post office. I'm not sure exactly how much he owns of what. I'm not up to speed on that. But I know that he stands to do well financially if the post office goes under.
Now, what's interesting is, in federal court, the post office came out and said that their first-class mail, their on-time delivery time was 38%. I mean, that's unimaginable. And it's all because of the decisions that this guy made to take a whole bunch of things offline, and basically, I would argue, to be Trump's errand boy to slow the mail down, partially because of the election and the mail-in ballots, but also partially because, and mostly because they want to destroy it. Because this would be really attractive for Amazon to pick up cheap, to then put UPS out of business.
Yeah, it really would. And, and we all remember when this was done, during the election cycle and why it was done. I was kind of surprised they even tried to make arguments that there was any other reason to do it other than to turn mail-in ballots into, something difficult that would give the president reason to question the validity of the election, which he ended up doing anyway.
The former president.
Yes, the former president. I'm gonna have to get used to that. It sounds good now that I say it out loud.
I'm not going with 45. Not doing that. I'm not getting sucked into the Colt 45 frame. He's the former president. And hopefully the former incarcerated president.
And that actually brings up an interesting point, because and I'm sure we're probably going to be talking about the impeachment stuff here in a minute. But there's a story in this that I think is kind of getting missed. And I don't know that it's necessarily getting missed, but it's not getting a whole lot of attention. All right, now we all know that Trump has been taken off Twitter and taken off most social media. And we know that this does quite a bit to keep him quiet. But there's not a news outlet in the world that wouldn't put a microphone in front of the guy if he wanted to. Yeah. And he hasn't said a word.
No,
not only has he not said a word, the whole family's quiet. You haven't heard anything from Ivanka or Jared or Don Jr. or Eric or any of them. They haven't said a word since they left the White House, which seems really strange, especially since, when we're talking about the fact he's on trial, currently. He's not saying a word about it. And I find that really strange. I'm really trying to reason out why that could be happening.
I got the polar opposite ideas. One, they're ducking and covering because they're trying to assess just how broke they're going to be at the end of all the legal fees they're not going to pay through all these trials that are going to end up happening. And if they can keep themselves out of jail. Or the other side, they're scheming and plotting on how to exact a revenge on the rest of the world.
Right. And it really could be either one of those things, to be honest. Although I'm kind of leaning towards duck and cover myself. I mean, given the fact, and I think Scott was talking about this earlier, there is a wide variety of investigations going on right now. We know very little about where each one is and what stage it's in or how close they might be to taking whatever action it is that they're going to end up taking. And then the whole team immediately, as soon as they don't have the cover of the White House, the cover of the presidency, everybody instantaneously goes radio silent. I mean, something just sounds like we're waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think they're waiting to see what kind of cover they're going to get out of the Senate, because I don't know about you, but I don't see any way possible that the Republicans in the Senate are going to convict him, even with all of the stuff that was laid out this week. And there was some pretty damning stuff. I mean, you look at those videos, there was some pretty damning stuff in there.
Yeah, there really was. And I mean, the case itself to any reasonable person is open and shut. Now that said, that's just not the world we live in currently, and we have people who are gonna find their way into an acquittal, no matter what anyone does. I mean, I think on the second day of the trial, when they laid out a huge chunk of the information, there were 15 Republican senators didn't even show up, or at least were out of their seats for a fair portion of the day. 15% of the Senate didn't deem it important enough to even be in the building, or at least be in the room. So going from that to a point where we find 17 willing to convict, I'm not sure we're going to get there. Now, that said, I would not be surprised if there were a couple surprises. Do I think we could get halfway there? I think we could. Do I think that there's 2 or 3 senators out there who haven't voiced any support for it yet who could eventually vote to impeach? Yeah, I think that's possible. I just don't think there's 17 of them.
No, I know I get a lot of response from people going, no, you're going to be surprised. You're going to be surprised. They're going to find his spine. No, they're not.
No, I don't think they are either. They will if and only if they deem it, to be in their best interest. Because at the end of this, that's what everyone is thinking about. And I've talked about this on a number of occasions. I've written about it on a number of occasions. There's no one who actually likes or enjoys the president, except for a few. There's no actual supporters out there, at least very few of them. But there are people who are not willing to challenge him, are not willing to, to confront him in any way because of the power he holds over voters that they need to stay in office. So there's a whole lot of, for lack of a better word, hostages out there who don't necessarily like their position, but they're not going to move because doing so is to touch that third rail.
Yeah, I'm curious your thoughts. Darren LaHood, a representative, a Republican from Illinois, who was a big Trump supporter. He's now part of the NRCC, the National Republican Congressional Committee. He's saying that they're not going to seek to punish anyone who voted for impeachment or will vote for impeachment. Is that a smokescreen, or do you think this is like maybe the beginning of getting rid of the Trump element?
It's possible, but if what we've seen so far is most of the people who have been censured haven't been censured by the NRCC, and haven't had their money cut off or anything like that, which is essentially what that arm of the party does. But they have been censured by their state parties. I mean, heck, the Arizona state party censured Cindy McCain. And I think that's where they're going to leave this too. They're going to. The state parties are going to admonish and censure and try to punish, folks and so on. But I'm not sure that the actual, Republican congressional apparatus is going to do anything about it.
So let's get to some of the thoughts of today. Were you surprised as I was that Trump's lawyer didn't have an answer other than it's the Democrats' fault that we don't know what Trump did in the minutes after he found out that the riot was going on? Are you surprised that he didn't have an answer?
Oh, I think he did have an answer. He just didn't have an answer he could say out loud.
Now, this is where I'll disagree. I think he's a good lawyer. I think he deliberately didn't ask because he didn't want to know. He wanted plausible deniability.
Well, that's true, too, because if someone asks that question, we know that question is coming. It's possible he never asked his client that question because he didn't want the answer. That's true. But he did do a really good job of getting mad and, and stomping his feet and doing all of those things at just the right time. I mean, what's the old, I think it's a Sandberg quote, says, if the facts are against you, argue the law. The law is against you, argue the facts. If both the facts and the law are against you, pound the table and yell like hell. Yep. That's what we saw today. Everything was against. I mean, I wouldn't have wanted to be in his spot. You know what I mean? So everything was against him. So what did he do? He pounded the table and yelled like hell, That's what you got to do.
No, it's one of those things where, you know, he did the best he can do, but yet we find out Trump's not happy with the defense. Do you think that, you know, just the fact that he was a little loud, a little showman-y, a little, you know, do you think that's going to make the boss happy?
I think that is more likely to impress Trump than, you know, than actual expertise. I mean, you know, just being mad and yelling and screaming and fighting and looking tough. These things have always been more important to Trump than competence, you know. Now that said, I mean, it doesn't really matter. He's never going to pay the guy. You know, I mean, none of these lawyers are ever going to get paid. I don't know why they're doing it. I mean, he's got this long history of stiffing his legal representation. It's going to be no different this time around. I don't know why he's putting so much effort into it.
Well, I mean, yeah, obviously you want the name recognition, but my first thought is, why, if you're a lawyer, especially a good one, why would you take this case without a retainer? Every lawyer I've ever known need a retainer.
Right. And, you know, and especially in this case, I mean, most banks in the world won't deal with him. Most lawyers in the world won't deal with him. It's all for the same reason. He never, ever, ever pays up. So I don't know what would, I mean, maybe the screen time is enough. Maybe the name recognition from the trial is enough to do the case pro bono, but he's doing the case pro bono, whether he knows it or not.
All of them are. Now I was under the impression, you know, that this was supposed to be not happening today because it's a religious holiday. I woke up today, I was like, wow, surprise, it's there. What happened?
Well, I think it was, and I do not want to pretend to know more about the holiday than I do, but I do think there was a time in the day that once that time passed, there was one of the members of council that couldn't participate past that time. So I noticed, especially as the trial went on later in the day, we only heard from one of Trump's lawyers and not from both of them. I can't quite remember what the other gentleman's participation was earlier in the day, but I do believe that there was a moment in there, a time on the clock that he wasn't allowed to go past for religious observance.
Either way, I missed a little bit, but I got most of it, and I got the important parts. The important parts are Trump's defense is I'm no better or no worse than Maxine Waters, and it's the Democrats' fault.
Yeah, it's always the Democrats' fault. You know, and it was, the entire day was pretty silly. Some of the montages that I saw, some of the video, the things that really kind of irked me about the video were just how propaganda-y they got. Like even down to there was this dark foreboding music behind it whenever Democrats were on the screen. And then there was this kind of, you know, wannabe Rocky theme song every time Trump was on the screen. And just, you know, it was really, really hokey. And, you know, and I really couldn't believe that they would submit something like that as evidence in a trial. It seemed to be way beyond the pale.
Yeah, it's one of those things that we'll see where it takes us. Now, one of the other things that got my attention is Hillary's name got brought up again. It's all about Hillary.
Right.
Do we need to explain that Trump was president and did hold office, and that impeachment was because of his acts while in office, or is that just too much bother?
Yeah, I mean, you know, that whole thing just makes too much sense. You can't say that out loud. It just makes too much sense. But yeah, at the end of the day, this was a performance, and the arguments are always based on emotion. You know, the arguments that come from the Trump side of the aisle, they're never designed to make anybody think. They're never designed to access the logical parts of your brain. They're always designed to elicit an emotional response. They're not trying to make you understand the reasons why Trump might be innocent or guilty or whatever. They're just trying to make you angry and then give you somewhere to focus that anger. Yep. And then they do this in the most repetitive of ways. Like in the videos today, there were several times they were in the same clip. They would show the same image or the same, same video clip of the same act over and over and over again within a minute or two of each other. And they did this several times, and always with that dark, foreboding music behind it and so on. I mean, it was really easy to spot for, people who do what I do.
Yeah, and they even brought up Madonna And again, being as dishonest as the right has been, they had the clip of Madonna saying that there are times that she thinks about burning down the White House. Which you go, oh my God, she's going to burn down the White House? And then if you would have just let the clip go, I don't know, 3 seconds longer, she goes, but I never would because this is why. It wouldn't change things, and then she goes into this whole explanation. But just the mere fact that she said, sometimes I think about burning down the White House, that was front and center.
Yeah. And of course, clipped in just the right way to make it sound as bad as possible. And it's going to be out of context because everything is. And these are kinds of things. And keep in mind that the folks on our side of the aisle, they do a little bit of this stuff too. They'll get creative with the clips and so on too. They're not quite as brazen about it as the folks on the right are, but they're not immune to it either.
Yep. No, I said this.
We've been known to do that as well.
Absolutely. In fact, on Wednesday when they rolled out the first set of clips, I said, it looks like propaganda to me on a certain level. It's all factual, it's all there, but the way it's all mashed together and there are bits and pieces looks a little like propaganda. But it is well laid out. It does provide a timeline, but you've got to be aware of that. I just think the right does it much better.
Yeah. Well, and that kind of explains how the two different sides argue. I mean, when you're trying to persuade someone, you have a fidelity to the truth, right? Now you're trying to move people. You're trying to present arguments that are going to persuade people and bring them to your side. And you're trying to move the needle. But if you have a fidelity to the truth, there's no real harm in that. Everyone persuades, all the time. Our opposition doesn't care about any fidelity to the truth. They're trying to win.
Right.
We're trying to persuade. They're trying to win. And to win, they'll do anything. Doesn't matter. Whatever brings a win, honest, dishonest, or any point in between, they're going to do it. And you saw that in their case. That's exactly what they did. It's really the same kind of thing. We both have the same goals. One side has a fidelity to the truth and facts. The other does not. And it comes out in how we argue both sides of the case.
No, you're absolutely right. They got the Vince Lombardi win at any cost mentality, even if you got to break the rules. And that it comes out. And I look, I know people who they vote for Republicans because of that, because they're willing to win at any cost. And I understand to a degree, I like to win as much as anyone else. But in this world, when you're talking about the president, the most powerful man in the free world, and future presidents, because for me this isn't only about punishing Trump. This is ensuring that down the road there isn't another Trump who goes, "What? The last 6 months of my administration, I can break whatever law I want." I mean, for me, that's the deterrent. We don't want people like a Josh Hawley thinking, "Hey, he got away with it, so can I."
Yeah, this is a door that you don't want open. You don't want it open a little bit. You don't want it loose on the hinges. You want that door nice, tight, and secure. And if we don't hold anyone accountable for this, then yeah, if we'd be silly to think this won't happen again. I mean, there have been recent instances of this in other countries. We just don't ever pay attention to them.
Yeah.
I think the most recent was in Italy. Was it Berlusconi? I think it was the prime minister there.
Silvio Berlusconi.
Yeah, and he had all these corruption scandals. The people booted him out of office. He leaves, and then what happens? He's able to rehabilitate himself. He comes back. He wins the office again, and guess what happens? The corruption train picks up right where it left off.
Yeah, a TV guy.
And these kinds of things can happen.
Yeah, he was a TV guy. Owned all the TV stations.
Right. Right. Now, that said, I honestly don't think Donald Trump's going to run again. Why would he? You know what I mean? What he really wants is the audience and the adoration and the power. He doesn't want the element that actually requires him to serve. You know what I mean? And if he can get that adoration and power and be that player without actually having to live in the White House and serve the people and do the things that the president's required to do, I don't think he wanted to win the first time. I don't know if I'm in the majority on that opinion, but I don't think he expected to win the first time. I don't think he wanted to win the first time. I think he was as surprised as anybody by it. And, because I don't think he actually wanted to serve. And he certainly spent his 4 years in the White House behaving like he had no intention of serving, or had no real desire to do the job or be in the place at all.
No, he did exactly whatever I think most people thought he would do. He was in it for the pomp and the circumstance. He was in it for the attention. which is why, I said if I had a choice of winning the Senate or the White House, I would win the Senate, because I do believe he's somebody who just wants people to pat him on the head and tell him he does a nice job. And here, sign this and we'll throw a big party for you. And if you could have gotten a majority in the Senate to ram through some stuff, I think he'd have signed anything. He'll sign anything, because he has no core ideology, I don't believe.
No, I really don't think he does. And that's something that we need to pay attention to, because, he could have just as well, I don't know about just as easily, but, given the fact that he was just looking for that popularity and adoration and things, if he would have found that in the Democratic Party, he would have stayed a Democrat. You know what I mean? And he would have been, our problem to deal with instead of the Republicans' problem. Well, he was everybody's problem to deal with. But, could have very easily been our shame instead of their shame. And so, and I think that's why, because he doesn't really have any core values or beliefs, or at least none that he's expressed.
It's an interesting. Do you think the left would have taken to him the way the right has? I think
no. At the end of the day, I don't think he would have found a home. And I think that's why he went to the Republican parties, because he couldn't find a home on the Democratic side of the aisle. However, if there was a certainty that he would have won, you know what I mean? Like, he was dismissed on the left because they kind of saw him as a joke.
Right.
If they would have known the kind of power that he could amass and the kind of cult of personality he could have developed around him, if that would have been known, if anybody had a crystal ball, I think there's just as much, opportunity for him anywhere as where he actually ended up.
Interesting, because I'm waiting for the Democratic Party to start eating itself any day now, especially over Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin, getting the minimum wage, basically saying the minimum wage is going to get sucked out of this budget reconciliation process for the rescue package. I now see there being some major divisions, and I hope that they can stave that off. But right. I'm curious your thoughts. Do you see that possibly happening?
Well, to some extent, it always happens. I mean, people always talk about the circular firing squad on the left, and they're not always wrong. But then again, this is what happens when you let a lot of different ideas in the room. You know what I mean? If you're going to be a Republican, you have to conform to some very strict ideology, and if you don't, they just excommunicate you, which is really good for order. You know what I mean? And on the left, we don't necessarily do that. We have people who have lots of different belief systems and lots of people who think that certain issues are more important than other issues and so on. So of course you're going to get this kind of infighting. And I think this is one place where a Donald Trump actually does some good. And I'm kind of surprised to hear those words come out of my own mouth, but here's what I mean. We got really close to the edge. I mean, we really came, incredibly close to losing it all. And you want to talk about the circular firing squad and everybody not being able to row the boat in the same direction. They come this close to losing everything. I think the idea is that hey, you know what? We all better put our oars in the water and row the same direction, or else we could have this again. No, I think that fear that Donald Trump has brought, I think that's going to create a whole lot of understanding between factions on the left that don't typically get along.
No, I think these last couple of days have really shown that out, especially when you look at the numbers on who's watching. The people on the left are paying attention, while we know the people on the right, and those are the people who should be watching their treason, they're not. So I hope you're right, and I'm hoping. We'll see where this takes us. But Brett, I appreciate the time, the thoughts. I look forward to talking to you again, my good friend.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Good stuff. As always, the professor. You can make sure you follow him on Twitter. One of my favorite folks there. We're going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
America must lead in the face of this existential threat. And just as with the pandemic, it requires global cooperation
President Biden puts climate change at the center of U.S. national security and foreign policy. Pollution from fossil fuels causes 1 in 5 premature deaths globally, new study finds. Plus,
this isn't good for anybody who had issues with their respiratory system or especially the wildlife.
Another oil pipeline spill, this time in San Francisco Bay.
All of those messes and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
The United States will now rejoin the Paris Climate Accord and the World Health Organization. The 3 things his predecessor hated most: the world, health, and organization.
This is your Green News Report.
Baby, we're sorry. We're just going through some stuff. Please take us back.
Okay, Desi Doyen, just when the world is trying to get rid of oil, another reminder as to just one of the reasons why we need to do so as soon as possible.
Yep, there's another oil spill, this time in San Francisco Bay. Crews are now working to clean up an estimated 600 gallons of crude that spilled from a pipeline at the Chevron oil refinery in the Bay Area town of Richmond.
Man.
The spill prompted a health alert for residents to close their windows and doors to avoid breathing the fumes.
There has been nothing but problems with that Chevron plant in Richmond, catching fire, leaking pipelines, anyway.
Yep. In Washington this week, President Joe Biden continued expanding his whole-of-government approach to climate change. He spoke to staff at the Pentagon for the first time as commander-in-chief, thanking them for their service and sacrifices to the nation after the tumultuous Trump administration and laying out his national security agenda. Biden emphasized their mission now includes combating climate change.
There's no aspect of our agenda, the 21st century leadership, where the women and men of the Defense Department do not have a role, whether it's helping curb the pandemic here at home and around the world, or addressing the real threats of climate change that are already costing us billions in impacts on our bases and our national security, or being part of an ongoing fight for racial justice.
Biden gave similar instructions to State Department personnel last week as he pledged to repair alliances, restore climate diplomacy to U.S. foreign policy, and, quote, earn back America's international leadership position.
Good luck with that.
We're taking steps led by the example of integrating climate objectives across all of our diplomacy and raising the ambition of our climate targets. That way we can challenge other nations, other major emitters, to up the ante on their own commitments.
I guess they're curbing emissions at the State Department by not using microphones.
He continued,
America must lead in the face of this existential threat.
And American leadership is probably going to be necessary because we already knew that the pledges countries made to reduce emissions under the UN Paris Climate Agreement are woefully inadequate to keep global temperatures in check. And we already knew countries are already failing to meet even those modest targets. Now, new research from the University of Washington calculates that world governments must nearly double the rate of their greenhouse gas cutting efforts over the next decade to avoid the most catastrophic effects of climate change. Meanwhile, new research from Harvard University has found that pollution from fossil fuels causes 1 in 5 premature deaths globally, suggesting that the health impacts of burning coal, oil, and natural gas are far higher than previously thought. In the most comprehensive examination of microscopic soot pollution data yet, the researchers estimated that exposure to pollution from power plants, vehicles, and industry accounts for about 18% of all deaths globally in 2018.
Really?
The impacts are not distributed equally. In the U.S. and Europe, fossil fuel pollution was linked to 1 in 10 premature deaths. In Asia, pollution caused nearly a third of deaths. The scientists conclude that ending fossil fuel pollution would increase global average life expectancy by more than a year and save nearly $3 trillion in global economic and public health costs every single year.
Wow. Of course, it will also increase population, which will increase emissions, but that's a story for another Green News Report.
Finally, some good news. The Biden administration is restarting the permitting process for the nation's first major offshore wind farm, reversing a Trump administration decision that canceled the process late last year. And a new report finds that the U.S. wind industry had its strongest year ever in 2020, nearly doubling new installations over 2019 for a new record high. The U.S. now has more than 60,000 wind turbines across 41 states, generating clean electricity for 38 million U.S. homes.
Wow, cool. And that's without even trying that hard. Imagine what we could do if we actually tried. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Don't forget you can download our reports anytime via Stitcher, TuneIn, Apple, or Google Podcasts. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
You know, it's an interesting. You know, we're leading into interesting times when one of the top 5 stories of the day is Justin Timberlake apologizes to Britney Spears. It's almost like, life's getting back to old normal. Now, granted, we have an impeachment going on that the vast majority of people aren't paying attention to. We've got a pandemic raging. We've got a Democratic Party that's shooting themselves in the foot over the minimum wage. But hey, at least we now know that Justin is sorry for his treatment of Britney Spears and Janet Jackson too. Don't forget her and the whole wardrobe malfunction. Yeah, I care not even. Let's see, is there anybody who cares less than me? No, probably not. Anyway, we're here to share some thoughts on the top stories of the day. Our good friend Bob Ney, former Ohio congressman, political analyst. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Well, thanks, Rick. It was the most generic apology. I'm trying to figure out what he generically apologized for all the times where his actions contributed to the problem.
Yeah.
Where he spoke out of turn. So, I don't know.
Yeah, I clearly don't care.
It was a generic apology.
It was one of those that I didn't care what he had done, and I don't care about the apology. So, but hey, at least he's cleared his soul. I'll have to be honest. I originally thought that maybe this is part of some kind of addiction recovery. because I guess you have to atone for your sins.
Ninth step, right?
That's where my mind went.
Okay. There you go. Generic atonement.
Yep.
Okay. And that, I think maybe you are right.
Yeah, just check that off the list. Move right on down the road.
Right.
And good for him if that's what it is. He's getting his what in order.
It might be.
There you go. I wanted to get your thoughts on the fact that Joe Biden's thinking about weighing sanctions on Russia on their pipeline that he has called a bad deal for Europe. He's kind of going all out against the pipelines.
Well, yes. I mean, I don't know. In general, I'm a bit cautious on the whole sanction deal, not with Russia, but just in general. He's calling it a bad deal for Europe, so I'm wondering if it's a bad deal for Europe, why do we sanction them and Europe doesn't? I kind of do wonder that, But in general, the United States, one problem I've seen over the years, I don't care what the administration is, who they are, what political party, and Congress itself, somebody says something in a foreign country we don't like, we're going to sanction that country now. It's sanctions. And I thought, now apartheid worked because the whole world got into it.
No, and this is where, the reason I bring this up is,
works.
Much like you've said, this is Biden saying this. Where is Europe? Where's the rest of the world? Because my hope was, and we've talked about this before, and you've said, and I agree with you, that Biden is, his expertise is foreign policy. So when I saw he's weighing this, I'm going, well, I hope he's weighing it with everybody else.
Right. Because they would be subject to U.S. sanctions, and then what would Europe do? And it's a pipeline geared to Europe. So I'm just not sure on these sanctions, again, because apartheid worked when the whole world got into it. If we sanction, what does it do? And how does Europe back out of dealing with Russia if this pipeline's already in progress? So I know I question sanctions, period.
Yeah, but now that I think back to it, the apartheid era, we had a song back then, the "We Are the World" song.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we just need a song.
Right, and we are. How about we are the generic apology country? I don't know what something. Let's do a ninth step as a country. How's that?
Well, that's 9A.
9A and B. Right.
Let's look at your state of Ohio. Revised your COVID death numbers up like 25%. We now look to New York, and a new report out last month that's by the Attorney General's office there found that the New York Department of Health may have possibly underestimated the number of deaths in nursing homes by, I don't know, 50%.
Right. Right.
Oops.
I mean, I don't think it's intentional by New York or Ohio. I really don't, because one's a blue state, one's a red state, so we can't really factor that in. But I just think it's the government at its best. And, of course, this will make people who are skeptical more skeptical. I don't think we need to let the numbers diminish the fact that, we have a problem. But don't you wish they could kind of get it a little bit more right?
Yeah, no, I mean, this is, as someone who wants good government, this is really frustrating to me, because be honest to me, and there's part of me that goes, this stuff was done on purpose so that they kind of, tap down the panic at a moment when we needed a little bit of panic. We needed to go, oh, hey, we need to stop being around each other for a little bit.
Right.
Just kind of a thought.
Sure.
Let's get to the big stuff today. Assessment of the Trump defense team and their responses to some of the questions by the senators.
I hope he's not paying a lot of money. Let me put it that way. Castor
he's not paying
was,
any money.
Castor was. Are they doing it pro bono?
No, I guarantee they're not, or at least they think they're not.
Well, they may sometimes lawyers do that for the fame of it,
Sure. No, Trump's got a history of just not paying anybody. That's where my point is.
Okay. I didn't follow that one. Castor, his performance was terrible, beyond terrible, and that was, the kind of the lead guy. But on top of it, they're going to one thing now. They have kind of given up on free speech, and they've given up on trying to say that, he used the words peacefully, which he did, but then if you read through it and what he said about the vice president, that's a different story. And they're just going towards the fact that it is, quote, not a constitutional purview of the Senate to do this. And I think that's where they're going to just kind of go back to no matter what.
Yeah, I was looking at some of the questions today, like the one by Marco Rubio. About we could do this. Someone could do this to Hillary Clinton. You go, no, I don't know. I don't think so. But immediately, as I'm listening to these people ask these questions, I'm going, this is what the meeting with the Trump defense lawyers brought. This is what you guys dreamt up in your meeting yesterday.
Right.
Is there? Let me ask you that, because there was a report that Cruz and a bunch of them had a meeting with Trump's defense lawyers.
Right.
Is there any impropriety in your mind there that they're coordinating?
No, because it's there should be a dividing line, but here's why I say no. This is a political process. Right. We can pretend it's just all legislative. It's political. It's a political process. So, they've met and they've talked. Now, if they would sit there and say, okay, you say this and then I'll say that, I think it obviously crosses a line if they've done that. But if they discuss, parts of the defense, it's a political process, so it doesn't shock me.
Yeah, no, I agree. And look, there's some things that I'm uncomfortable with, and I think I told you this the other day. I'm uncomfortable with Pat Leahy being the judge and a juror. I'm uncomfortable with that, and not even just a little bit. I have a problem with that. That's, to me, not how this is supposed to be done. But when you've got a Supreme Court justice who says, "No, I don't think I'm going to do it," it is what it is.
Right. There's some ugly things in this. I think one of the worst things that I have seen in the last few days is, and they won't answer the question to Trump lawyers. They won't say, did Senator Tuberville talk with Trump about Pence's safety? And they won't answer that question. about the phone call.
Right.
And that's an important phone call because basically the senator hung up on the president. This was at 2:14 in the afternoon, and he said, they've removed the vice president. I have to go. And Trump then tweeted 10 minutes later, bad-mouthing the vice president.
Right.
He can do this, knowing very well that he wasn't even, in the building. So I think those are just things that, obviously they should keep asking them questions about that.
No, absolutely. And look, the lawyers are good. They didn't have answers other than to blame Democrats for not having answers to the questions that they should be answering, because they never ask the question because they're good lawyers. They want plausible deniability. They want to go, I don't know. He didn't tell me.
And remember that Castor made one comment basically alluding to the fact of there's differences between manslaughter and murder. He said that. Now think about that. That's sort of, and I think it was even Roy Blunt said, that's not really good to use that analogy, So it's just, it's bad, and they will just focus on unconstitutional actions by the Senate, and that's where people will bolt and then vote against it. I'm assuming that there'll be 5 or 6 Republicans to vote, that Trump's guilty. I'm assuming.
I'm thinking there's a radical number of 7. I'm thinking there's going to be one more wild card out there. It's going to go, you know what? I almost got captured that day. I could have been ripped to shreds and hung in the gallows that they built out there. There's something wrong here. I could be wrong, but I'm putting the number at 7. No way they get to 17.
Right. That's why I've always argued it should have went right away in the heat of the moment when people really were at a complete emotional pitch over this.
No, we 100% agreed on that.
Right,
Now, there's talk of witnesses. Have they decided if they're going to be witnesses, and do you think there should be?
I don't think there should be, because I don't know what else you do with it. I don't think either side's probably going to, in actuality, agree to witnesses. I don't think it would be okay if there were. I mean, at this point in time, I just don't see where it's going to matter. I thought that the Democratic side was very effective on using the videos that they did.
Yeah, no,
and showing how. I thought it was very, very effective, very emotional, very effective.
No, they did a really good job of pulling the videos of the people who recorded their treason. Yeah, I agree.
I mean, look, Rick, don't you think in the court of public opinion, things have varied in the sense that in the long run, even though there won't be a vote to say he can't run again, I think that this in itself has done damage.
I think it's done some damage, but the sad reality is the people who were, and you could disagree with me if you believe I'm wrong. The people who didn't like Trump are paying attention in a hyper mode, and the people who were part of Cult 45 have dropped out. So the people that you need to be reaching aren't paying attention.
But some of the deep Trump supporters, the type that actually were out there wanting to storm the Capitol, some of them are dismayed because he eventually said, something about them. Some of them. I still think there's a certain percentage of people that had supported him up to that point, and after this happened, I think it's enough that he doesn't run again.
No, I agree with that. I think he's done politically.
He's done.
But I do think he's still going to be a major player and a thorn in the Republican Party side for a while.
Sure. The Republican Party is going to have to decide what it wants to do. Will they follow Eric Trump, who says, you're with my dad or you're against the party? Are they going to do that? I think that the Trump family is going to have their hands full anyway with the New York Attorney General, personally. I think that's going to keep them busy. But the party itself has to, sort of move on, yet they don't want to anger the basic Trump supporter either. I'm not talking about the way out Trump supporters. I'm just talking about people who, supported him that weren't the type that would storm the Capitol.
Yeah, well, we'll see how it plays out. I personally, I want to get back to hammering the Republicans for not supporting the recovery package, or the rescue package or whatever they're calling it these days, because people do need money. People do need to get through this pandemic. We need to be getting shots in the arms and doing all that stuff. because we've got so much that's not being done. And I'll tell you, I'm a little miffed today at Joe Manchin and Kelly Simona for their opposition to the increase of the minimum wage. Do you agree with them that it doesn't belong in there?
I think that the minimum wage should be considered separately. That's what I think, on a separate, vote. I've voted for minimum wage, for example, in the past, and sometimes I didn't if it was right on the heels of one increase. But I mean, I guess you could say, well, get it wherever you have to. It is part of an economic plan. I understand that. But I would like to see probably a separate amendment vote on it.
Yes, I would like to see two functional parties debate what a reasonable minimum wage would be, but we don't have that right now, Bob.
Right.
We don't have Republicans who are willing to vote for a minimum wage increase. And I point here to my state of Pennsylvania. We could not get an $8.75 minimum wage over 3 years past a year and a half ago. So, it's still, the law of Pennsylvania is still $7.15. We defer to the federal minimum wage of $7.25. So, I mean, the fact that we couldn't even get it bumped up to $8.75 tells me that there's no interest on the Republican side of the aisle. And now we've got these two Democrats who have, we shouldn't do this here. Now is not the time. No, now is the time.
I mean, they could put it in the package, and if those two Democrats don't want it, then there could be an amendment to reduce it or move it out or whatever they want to do. That would be probably a cleaner way to do it.
Yeah. Going to be interesting to see how this plays out. Now
here's a point though. Right now, and you use the word focus. Right now, people aren't even focusing on that. They're not even. I don't think the members are even getting heat over any of this.
And that's the thing that gets me. I mean, all the attention.
The media is not, focused in on it.
Yeah, all the media attention is on this impeachment, which we have to have. I think it was good for the country to have the presentations that have happened over the last couple of days. I wish they would have done them in the evening. I know the senators and stuff have families that they have to go home to, and they've got things that they need to do. But these hearings should have been done at night so that people could go home and watch it and they should have been all over all of the news channels so you couldn't avoid it, that you had to watch this stuff in front of you.
Right.
I don't know.
I just think they need to wrap it up and then move on. Either way, however it goes.
And I guess that's going to happen early next week, right?
Right.
And then we can get on to moving the country.
And we can get on to arguments and the stimulus and
right. We got other arguments to make.
Other ones, right? Exactly.
Good stuff, Bob. I appreciate the time as always.
Thank you, Rick.
Thanks so much, my friend.
Thank you,
Bob Ney. And look, I'm with him on the. We got other things to focus on, other things to be angry about. For me, I'm just a little miffed over the minimum wage too. Gonna take a quick break. Something else I'm miffed about on the other side. Stick around. You listen to the Rick Smith Show.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1913. That was the day that the labor leader known as Mother Jones was arrested in West Virginia. She was there to support coal miners during the Paint and Cabin Creek strike of 1912-1913. The West Virginia coal fields were one of the bloodiest sites of labor conflict in U.S. history. The bosses had evicted the striking workers from their company homes. As a result, the strikers lived in tent camps under dire conditions. 83-year-old Mother Jones visited these camps where she gave fiery speeches. In the fall, she organized a march of the miners' children through the streets of Charleston, West Virginia. Authorities saw Mother Jones as a troublemaker and wanted to expel her from their state. On February 7th, guards hired by the bosses attacked one of the miner camps with a machine gun mounted on an armored train. One striker died. The workers responded with an attack of their own, thus giving the governor the excuse to declare martial law. Mother Jones was arrested and put on trial for murder at a military court. The basis for her arrest was a speech she had given 3 months earlier. Mother Jones refused to recognize the authority of the trial, writing in her autobiography that my arrest and trial were unconstitutional. She was convicted and sentenced to 20 years. It was during this trial that Mother Jones was called the most dangerous woman in America. The sentence of this well-known labor leader spurred national outrage. The United States Senate ordered an investigation into the conditions of the West Virginia coal mines. West Virginians elected a new governor who released the beloved Mother Jones. Upon her release, she continued fighting for workers until the day she died at 100 years old. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So you may remember yesterday a little miffed over Dave Ramsey being against the survival checks because they aren't life-changing, and that this isn't life-changing stuff, and basically if you needed it you were screwed already, which there's some truth in that. Too many working people are screwed in this economy. But I find it amazing that, and I haven't heard anybody really complaining on the right about the fact that Big Pharma is going to claim about $1 billion in tax deductions after they settle all of the opioid cases. You may remember Johnson & Johnson and a number of the distributors of OxyContin and these opioids. They're settling somewhere around $26 billion. Evidently, because of the CARES Act, they're going to get deductions that may work somewhere around $1 billion for each of them. And I'm going, there's something seriously wrong when you're talking about a company that's been sued, and they're going to be able to get a tax refund off of what they were sued for. Now, normally they can't. But because of the CARES Act, and it was something that was, who knows how it was written in there, but they're potentially going to be able to claw back $1 billion each from us. At a time when you've got senators and congressmen saying, well, that extra unemployment, that's horrible, we can't afford that. But this, I haven't heard any yet. Maybe there will be. Maybe I'll find Ted Cruz found something that might help him think about trying to get his soul back, but I doubt it. We'll see. Now, I look at these settlements, and while $26 billion seems like a lot of money on the grand scale, it's really not. Especially when you consider the fact that 70,000 people each and every year for the last several years have died from opioid addictions. And how do you make those families whole? I have a friend who she tells me her brother got hooked on them because of an accident. Wasn't that he was a junkie? Wasn't that he was out looking for to do the next drug? He got him the way most people who get hooked on opioids do. They got it from the doctor because they had an accident, they had pain. And then it was just all downhill. And I go back to myself. I remember going for minor surgeries and minor things where immediately they go, here are your painkillers, and I'll go, no, I'm good. I'm good. When I had my hip replaced, they wanted to write here's a prescription for the opioids, and I took the prescription. I didn't take any of them, but I took the prescription just in case, because who knows. But I don't know. I maybe we're moving in the right direction. But then again, I have people telling me now it's getting too hard to get them for people who really need them. And this is where we need to have some much better laws on the books and some much more common sense into how we give these things out. But I think about my friend and who lost her brother, and my heart goes out to her because it's tragic. And I think about people that I've known who've been hooked on it, and it's It's tragic. But hey, they're going to get a tax break. Isn't that wonderful? Isn't that wonderful? Just crazy. I'm looking forward to wrapping up the impeachment. As I said, I'm on the record. There's no way in a cold day that the Republicans are going to convict. And I like what Scott Dworkin said earlier. He said, Trump's already been convicted in the court of public opinion, and I hope that's right. I hope every one of us looked at what was presented, and on both sides. I listened to the Republican arguments, and I agreed with them on the argument about Patrick Leahy. I do. I don't think he should be the judge and a juror. But all of the evidence, overwhelmingly against Trump. It's that simple. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you missed any of today's program, you can get the podcast there at thericksmithshow.com. I'll get the smartphone. I got take the program on the go on the smartphone. I'll just get the app. Lots looking forward to the coming days and weeks. Lots and lots coming. But again, if you want to get in contact with me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.